So, we are going to be talking about some red flags that you need to be looking for in your child's progress report. And today we're also going to be cutting out all that vague language in progress reports, like P is for progressing. Sounds like Sesame Street, right? And you're going to be learning how we really need to use that progress report as a measuring tool and how your child is doing with those specific IEP goals. So, welcome, whether you're watching live or on the replay. I'm Charmaine Tanner, and I am excited to be here. I'm one of those advocate nerds that can nerd out about progress reports. So, I'm going to try and keep this easy for everybody to understand and know that there's always deeper levels that we can go to when we're looking at something like a progress report. So I would love your comments, your conversations, so add them so we can really have this be interactive. And I'd love to know what your questions are about progress reports that you've been getting for your child. And I hope that we have some good reports as far as things that are really meaningful. One of the things that I think when you get a progress report, and hopefully you're getting them throughout the year and not just a couple times a year, it's like you look at it and yeah, it looks official, right? And I think that's one of the first, where's my red flag? The first red flag that we want to look at is that you trust the format. It looks official. It looks like the computerized IEP, right? It's on the official form. Sometimes you might have graphs, which are helpful if you know how to read them. But yeah, I mean, when you get down to it, it's like, actually, what does it say about my child's progress? A lot of times there's a code, and it's like trying to crack the code. But some of them will be letters, like P for progressing, or NA for goal hasn't been started yet. Sometimes your progress reports might have numbers on it. Number 1 means making satisfactory progress. Number 2 means goal might goal should be met on time. So there's these kind of key codes that you need to look for in the progress report. However, just because it's that official looking paper does not mean that it's going to give you useful information, because those letters, those numbers, they don't really tell us much. So, what we're looking for are progress reports that tell more of a story and not just give you a letter or a number. So, let me know if this makes sense to you. And also, let me know, I'm curious, like, how many times a year do you get a progress report? And do you see this coding, like P for progressing or numbers, or do you see a narrative where the teacher's really written in some helpful information? Do you see any other kinds of comments that are helpful? So put that in the comments. Yes. One of the things you've probably heard me say before is it's important to ask questions. So we want to stop just assuming that this official looking progress report is really meaningful when we don't get it, we don't understand what it's really telling us. So I want to give you a few questions that are like perfect to ask in this situation. So one is asking, so everybody remembers, everybody on the IEP team remembers, where was my child with this goal when we were first starting out, right? When we first wrote this goal. because you want to be able to have that starting point of, oh, yeah, this is how many words per minute that my child started reading at, when we wrote this IEP a couple months ago. Because without knowing that starting line, or sometimes it's called the baseline, you won't be able to do any measuring, right, of how well your child's been doing. So that's one of the questions that you can ask. Another question is, just like in English, tell me, what has my child learned since being on this IEP and receiving all this specially designed instruction? Tell us what my child actually learned. And the other question is, what do they need to learn next? So you want to know how long, how far they've come in their progress. And you want to be able to celebrate celebrate when things are going really well. But if you have this progress report that doesn't really tell you much, you don't know if you're like, yeah, this is really working. So it's important to have that celebration and to know exactly, this is where your child was, this is what they learned, these are the next steps we're going to take so their learning continues, right? So the second red flag that I see often, if I could unfurl it, is that we accept these vague words. So as a parent, I know sometimes it's like, I don't know, how many questions can I ask? And it's like, you're like, I don't know, this is on the official paper. This is how they have it. I guess this is what progress reports are supposed to be. However, we do need to know more specifics, right? If you think P for progressing is good enough, then this probably isn't the webinar, the live show that you want to be watching today, because we're going to be talking about how to get more than that P for progressing. And we're going to go back to asking more questions, because that keeps the conversation going versus you get it home, maybe, the progress report either emailed or maybe your child brings it home in his backpack. And it's like, you need to be able to have some conversations about that progress report. And so these are some good follow-up questions. One that I love is, can I have copies of the work samples? Now, depending on what the IEP goal is, depending on what it says in the IEP as far as how they're going to measure your child's progress, hopefully it doesn't just say observation, because we want more than anecdotal information. And so if it's, like an academic skill that the teacher could actually send home a copy. This was the math work that he did today, or this was the story, and these were the comprehension questions that your daughter answered. Some kind of work sample to see, like, oh, this is what they're doing at school, can be one of those aha moments. And, another thing that I suggest to families is, if the IEP goal is being measured by something like work samples, and it says they're going to be collected every other week, then I think it's very reasonable for you as a parent to ask for copies of those work samples every month. I mean, you don't have to wait 9 weeks to get the quarterly progress report, or you don't have to wait a semester if your school is on a semester system. Even though you might not get an official progress report, if you ask teachers, you've already got the copies of the work that they've done, please just, send home a copy to me. That doesn't take very much time. And it really, really gives you so many more insights. One, one, you can look at the handwriting on the paper because sometimes my son Dylan, especially in middle school, would bring home some kind of a worksheet about, whatever they were studying, Egypt or something. And I could tell, I mean, it was very obvious that probably a para was writing in some of Dylan's answers. So, one, you can look, see what your kid's handwriting is like, make sure it's actually your child that's doing the work. And then, two, like I said, it gives you some kind of idea of what they're doing. So, work samples, yeah, they are very important. Now, the other thing is, maybe it says your child, started out being 40% accurate doing some skill. And now the progress report says, your child is 70% accurate with that goal. However, you want to look at consistency. Was that data just taken right before the progress report was made? I've done things like that when I was a special ed teacher. Or is the progress based on all of the data that the teacher's been collecting the whole time? And are we seeing this, new skill that they've developed? Are we seeing them using it? Not only, maybe in the resource room, but are they using that skill in the general ed classroom? Right? So we want to see consistency, we want to see generalization. All of those kinds of things are great follow up questions that you can ask. So let's see here. The third red flag that I see when parents are looking at progress reports and trying to decode them is they forget sometimes, you might forget sometimes, that this progress report is tied to the IEP goals. So unless we have measurable IEP goals, it's going to be very hard to measure their progress, right? So we always have to go back and look at specifically how that goal is written. Now, on some progress reports, you might have, I just kind of lost it. What was I thinking? Shoot. Oh, in some progress reports, which are helpful, is they'll have the goal typed out and then they'll say what your child's progress is, right? If they don't have the IEP goal typed out on your progress report, you want to flip back to that IEP and see how the goal is written. Because maybe the goal is written that your child will do this 4 out of 5 times. But you want to know, like, what were those individual scores on each of those 5 tries, right? Or it could say, as far as like a measurement that, your child's your child's going to be able to engage in a group recess activity or something. And of course that's not measurable, and it's like for a consistent 2 weeks. So every morning recess or something. So depending on how the goal is written, you want to make sure that when they're measuring progress, they're measuring, did they do 5 trials and did they figure out and report individually what happened on each of those trials? Are they looking at recess and your child being consistent over time? And that's how they're measuring progress. So it's really important to understand that. So we want to make sure that we're not treating the progress report as, well, it's just, a general kind of update. No, it's a requirement in IDEA, the federal law, and it's also there it should be a time where we can stop and reflect as an IEP team and say, are we being successful helping this student learn these skills? And again, we have to remember that the reason why your child has these IEP goals is to help them access that general ed curriculum. So it's the progress report is not just this generic summary that we can accept. It's really important to say we really want to know exactly what's happening, right? You really need to use that IEP as your measuring stick and make sure the progress report goes back to those specific goals and talks about the specific way that those goals were measured, right? Another question that I think is really helpful for parents to ask is, does the goal say your child's going to do it independently? Does it say they're going to get 2 verbal prompts? Because your child might be making progress on that goal. However, you're not quite sure. It's like, are they really doing this all by themselves? How much prompting is, the teacher having to give them or a peer giving them prompts? So those kind of nuance questions are important for you to ask. And I mean, you can ask every time, a progress report comes out. You can request that you have an IEP meeting and the whole team gets there and you get to have that conversation. Because the progress report should really be informing what's happening, as far as instructional strategies and such. So if we know what's working, we want to celebrate that and keep doing that, right? If we notice with the progress report, your child's progress has been pretty flat, not very, not increasing, then that should give us a message as adults. Something isn't working here. It's like, what a concept. And then we just don't identify like, well, shoot, they're not making much progress. It's like, let's take it a step further, right? Because we don't want to leave it at, well, they're just not making progress. We'll have to keep working on this goal. It's like, no, take a time out. There's a message here that we need to be looking at. And it might be the teacher needs to try something different as far as instructional strategies. It might be we're teaching this in isolation and we need to be, instead of in the counselor's office role playing, we need to be on the playground actually using the skills that we've learned, right? It's crucial that we don't accept this is hard for them. They just haven't made much progress. It's like, no, what do we as adults need to change so your child is making that continuous progress? Because if progress reports leave you guessing, that ain't doing their job. And it's a red flag. Oops. It's a red flag if you're guessing, if you don't know. Are they making a little progress? Have they really jumped with their skills and look how much further they've come? You want to know that too. So thank you for being here. If you're watching the replay, know that you can still make comments and I will circle back and answer those. And I appreciate you being here because I know your time is precious. So, as an advocate, I really hope that you can take some of this knowledge that we have had in our live show today and use that. You may have already gotten your first progress report, or it may be coming in a couple weeks. So I want you to know that I'm always here to support parents. My passion is to make sure that your child is happy, safe, and learning every day beside their classmates in that general ed classroom. So I'm Charmaine Tanner. We got to keep on keeping on, and I will see you the next time we're live. So take care.